the hard place. Like a wind from Goldland he sweeps by, blown far from his homeland in search of glory and honor. We walk in the garden of his turbulence.
Hello and welcome to Movie Joust. My name is Jesse Nussman, a film critic living here in Atlanta, Georgia, and with me on the other line are the Timon and Pumbaa of the Atlanta Film Critics Circle, Jason Evans and Josh Sewell. Welcome back, guys. It's the holiday season. We're gonna ring in the holidays by talking about Pride Rock, about Simba, Timon, Pumbaa, the rest of the Lion King crew. How are you guys?
I'm Pumbaa, aren't I?
That you said it, not I. So,
well, not to give too much away, but does that mean we're tremendously unfunny?
Oh,
that did. I will say.
Wait. The better question is: does that mean we are tremendously useless and add nothing to the story?
Come on. I don't know about you guys, but watching just like Seth Rogen's voice come out of a warthog that like you could tell those animators were trying so hard of like, can we just make this animal just like 5% expressive, and it just sort of looking like a stupid little puppet. This is an audio medium, so this is not a good way for me to like reenact this, but you guys can say it just sort of looked like a little like sock puppet just talking the entire time, and that made me giggle. That was maybe like one of the few bits of enjoyment I got out of Mufasa, the Lion King prequel, that we are now going to talk about. Guys, this is a Barry Jenkins movie, which is unusual. Jason, you and I talked about it a little bit before the screening last night. Josh, have you read this New York Magazine profile with Barry Jenkins where he talks about making this movie?
Quotes. I wanted to wait until after I wrote my review to read it, but I caught some of the. Again, audio medium. I'm using finger quotes. The highlights of the article.
Yeah, a real like fascinating, like frank admission of like, I basically took this for like, it sounds like Underground Railroad was just like an insanely stressful experience for him, and him just saying like, I took this for work-life balance. Basically, the script was better than I thought it was going to be. I wanted to be close to my partner. And then, the weird pivot that article turns where it's like, so what'd you think about doing this? This is different for you. And him being like, yeah, cool experience. Don't think I'll ever do this ever again.
Never gonna do it again.
This is, I think there are two aspects to that are worth addressing. One is Barry Jenkins is someone who typically directs physical things, like people that actually exist in a real space, and this is directing bits and bytes and digits, so to speak, and that's probably very, very different for him. And then the other thing is he's used to having the last word to some extent, and when you're making a Disney legacy property with Disney IP that is as treasured as the Lion King, you are always going to be answering to the forces upstairs.
Yeah, maybe this is a little bit of maybe this is a little bit of a preview, because next I want to get like, let's just bulldoze into you guys' thoughts, because I have a lot to talk about with this movie. I have pages and pages of notes and just curious observations, but my sort of big takeaway walking out last night was, not since Marvel's The Eternals have I witnessed so much just on-screen tension between a filmmaker who clearly like loves to make choices and the Disney studio notes just sort of like bashing on screen and sort of like actively fighting against each other. And the result was, I thought, a very unusual movie that like I'm fascinated to talk with you guys about. I can't quite say it's good, but I definitely left with like, that was a lot of just like things bumping up against each other and two very different artistic filmmaking styles just clashing on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would never presume to speak for somebody immensely more talented than me, like Barry Jenkins or something. But that's how it struck me as well. Is this is an artist trying his hand at a new art form while I'm assuming also cashing a pretty solid paycheck. And after the masterpiece that was Underground Railroad, but also the masterpiece that nobody saw that was Underground Railroad, I totally get dude needs groceries, but I'm with you. Like, when I was working out my thoughts earlier today, I remember before I saw like a frame of the trailer or anything, like a really early interview, I remember Jenkins saying something about how to him it felt a little like Godfather 2, and that was the angle he was going to take on it. And in the scene, like in the bulk of the story, where you're focusing on kid and teenage Mufasa and kid and teenage Taka, who, spoiler but not really, becomes Scar.
What?
I know! You can really feel what, at least to me, and maybe this is because I'm a Jenkins apologist or whatever, you can feel like he was going for some semblance of like that sort of inevitable Greek tragedy or something.
You can see clearly like why, if you're reading this just like on the page, being like, no, this is better than expected. I could see how this could work
with this.
Yeah.
But the downside is every time, like, and again, considering the brick walls I'm sure that he kept running into in the creative process, he does, I would argue, as well as he can with the flashback stuff, where you can really feel the tension is in those present day scenes where you have Rafiki telling the story to Simba and Nala's kid, and having Pumbaa and Timon be like the peanut gallery. Like, you could just feel Disney execs going, this movie's too dark, this movie's too sad, we need jokes, we need, how are we going to fit Beyonce in here? How are we going to get Childish Gambino in here? And they didn't call him Donald Glover. They called him Childish Gambino. And so you can just feel, at least to me, Barry Jenkins putting his head down and trying to power through all of these notes.
So to me, I say this all the time, Jesse, I've said this to you many times. Story. And I'm a little surprised that Barry Jenkins read this script and was like, oh, that's promising, because to me, this is just an incredibly poor story that didn't need to be told and doesn't have very much to say. It seems silly to say this about an animated film, but an animated film that involves talking animals, but there's nothing that feels real or honest about it. Did you guys get that as well? And here's what I mean. When we walk into the movie, we accept that we're in a world of talking animals that act like humans. It's fine. But we also accept that they need to have a reason to do things. They need to have genuine emotions. They need motivations. We need to go on a journey with them. That's what we had in the first movie. Sure, it's talking animals, and that's a great way to get kids engaged. But the story itself needs to make sense, whether these are lions or humans or robots or ants or whatever. So with that said, there's very little about this story that feels real or honest. The marketing tells us Mufasa's an orphan, so I don't think it's a spoiler to say that he loses his parents early in the movie. He washes downstream down a river, and he befriends a young lion named Taka, who will eventually become Scar. And they almost immediately begin singing a song about being brothers. Like his parents literally died the previous scene. He's like, I just want to go home. Oh, but let's sing a song about being brothers and being happy together. It's not real. It doesn't make any sense. And then later on, there's a scene where his adopted family is being threatened. Mads Mikkelsen is about to kill them, and Mads Mikkelsen starts singing a song about how he's going to kill them. It's just so awkward. What's going on here?
Yeah, let's talk about the music for a second, because obviously, the Elton John songs from the original Lion King are,
classics.
Some of the most iconic Disney songs. We have Lin-Manuel Miranda doing the songs for this movie.
Cashing a check.
Who, I mean...
I mean, and he shouldn't need a check. That's what's upsetting. Hamilton, he should have $1 billion from Hamilton.
Well, I was going to say,
is
he sort of the new, like, he is trying to step in and is like, I'm the new, like, go-to Disney, because, like, he did the music songs for Moana, and he did the songs for, is it Encanto? He did the songs for, like, it. How did you guys feel about, like, because I know some people that are like, Lin-Manuel Miranda can't do no wrong, like, especially after I didn't see Moana 2, but the big takeaway I heard from Moana 2 was like,
the songs are terrible.
Really underestimated how good those Lin-Manuel Miranda songs were. But then again, I know plenty of other people that are like, too much. We have oversaturated the market with Lin-Manuel Miranda songs. How did you feel about, like, these new, because the Circle of Life is not sung in this. We get a brief, like, half jokey Hakuna Matata that kind of feels like a studio note of like, we gotta, the children will riot in the theater if we don't have Timon and Pumbaa sing Hakuna Matata. But how did you guys feel about the new songs that are in this one?
So yeah, it definitely feels like, whether intentionally or whether Disney's trying to force him into that role, that Lin-Manuel Miranda is trying to be like the new Alan Menken.
Yes.
Where he's like, I'm going to do everything. And I kind of, like, I wanted to give these songs the benefit of the doubt pre-screening, because I was like, man, the Moana 2 songs were terrible because Lin-Manuel was working on Mufasa. So I was like, okay, so the songs in Mufasa should at least be like Moana level. You know, they are not at all. And
I like the brother song, honestly.
See, that's where we're gonna.
That one's kind of an earworm. Like, I've been humming that one today.
It's all about weird pronunciations, though. Like, every line ends not with brother, but with brother. Mm-hmm. And just like with Mads Mikkelsen's villain song, every line ends with, like, bye bye.
Oh,
so,
that's the worst.
Song.
That's the worst song in a Disney movie I've heard in like 20 years, basically.
It's like, look how scary this villain is. He's going to say bye-bye every 5 seconds.
I found, so there are a couple of the songs, I don't remember the exact title, and I need to go back and listen to, some of the soundtrack, to really pick out which ones I like the best. There are a couple of songs that I recall listening to during the movie and thinking, oh, that's not bad, but there's nothing that reaches the level of even like the third or fourth best song in the original Lion King.
Yeah.
And that's a real pity.
You didn't like the Can You Feel the Love Tonight sequel that isn't Can You Feel the Love Tonight?
Oh.
See, I kind of liked that one. Like, I like the songs when they lean into being a little bit more kind of like R&B, like top radio, which is a little weird for me, but of just sort of like, this is at least different. But like, I don't want to come out and be like, all the songs are great. Like, I thought there was like one earworm song. Most of them, I'm kind of with Jason, were kind of like, this is fine. Like in the movie, I'm not minding this, but like, I could not hum you like any of them from now on. And then the Mads Mikkelsen villain song, like I said, I was like, I need to pull. Does someone have a pocket knife so I could like chop my ears off, so I don't have to listen to this?
I keep on going back to that they're jarring. Like, there isn't enough music in the movie to be like, okay, this is a musical and we're advancing the story through songs a lot. It wasn't like Wicked or a number of other movie musicals where the songs become an integral part of telling the story. It just feels like we're going to interrupt the story to give you a song now. And that's the worst kind of music in movies. Even if it's a good song, if you take me out of the story for the song, then you're making a mistake. But if I can get away from the music for a second, I think the other problem with this is that there's no arc to the characters. Now, the only character who has any growth, the only character who changes at all, the only character who has anything happen to them is Scar.
Put a pin in that. I want to talk about the Scar arc, which I found hilarious.
It's terrible. Well, the problem is it's a bad arc. And this is the problem with making a prequel, especially a prequel where we know where everyone has to end up. I mean, like, you're not talking 3 generations earlier. We're talking prequel that has to lead you up to where these characters are at the start of The Lion King. And at the start of The Lion King, Scar is Mufasa's brother, who is jealous of him and they kind of a little bit get along. All right, so where do we go to get to that point? And in this movie, we begin with Scar and Mufasa being really close, and then Scar, Taka, whatever you want to call him, takes such a left turn, such a dramatic, huge, unearned left turn to become the bad guy, and then, and screw it if I'm spoiling it, I don't care, and then he's kind of not the bad guy again. I was just like, how are we getting it? It's not real. That's what I keep on going back to. The story doesn't feel earned, and that no one has an arc that is believable or makes sense of their character. In the original Lion King, Simba has an incredible arc. I mean, that's what makes the story great. He is, I am not worthy of my father. I'm not worthy of being the king.
Well, that's what happens when you're cribbing from Hamlet, though.
Right. Good point.
Yeah, I want to put a pin in the arc thing, because I do also want to talk about the bizarre non-arc of Mufasa as a character in this.
100%.
But
he is Mufasa at the beginning and the end. There's no arc, no development.
Well, because
you brought up realism. I think the biggest, pun not intended, elephant in the room that we have to talk about is the quote live action, and I'm doing this all in air quotes because let's be real, this is an animated movie. This is a Disney holiday animated movie, but because this is needing to connect to the Jon Favreau remake of Lion King, which, no offense to Jon Favreau, love Chef, but maybe one of the most
unnecessary.
I was gonna say intellectually bankrupt movies I've ever seen, like a truly evil movie. I think.
Yeah.
By the way, made $1 billion.
Right, like a movie that was basically like, let's do a shot for shot version of this beloved animated movie, but make the animals photorealistic, and somehow zapping all of the sort of like fun and visual panache out of that movie. And because Barry Jenkins' film is having to sort of be in lineage of that is the animation style at which this movie has to be done. Now, I think Barry tries to find some ways to kind of put his visual flair a little bit in this movie more than Jon Favreau did. But I want to ask you guys, because one of my kind of takeaways that I was thinking about leaving the theater last night was, if this was, instead of Barry, you need to do this as a sequel to the Jon Favreau quote live action Lion King remake. If this was Barry Jenkins, you can do a prequel, sequel, whatever we want to call this, to the 2D 90s Lion King movie, and gives him like full reins to, like, you can lean into the artifice of animation. Even if it's going to be 3D animation, you can lean into the artifice of it. Would we be talking here today and be like, that movie kind of wasn't half bad?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like the things that I was going to say, I think we're going to spend a lot of time being really negative about this movie, so I wanted to at least throw out some positives. All the stuff that I liked about this movie, it feels like is coming from Jenkins. I can't prove that, but just based on his previous work, I can feel that fighting to come to the surface. For instance, you were talking about the quote unquote animation style, right? In the Jenkins movie, I feel like he at least gives them facial expressions.
Yes.
Which the Favreau version didn't do. He tries to bring in some of his trademark stuff. Some works better than others, I will admit. Like, I know he tries to do a handful of moonlight character looking straight into the lens kind of shots.
Yeah.
Some worked, some didn't. But I think that if they just gave him carte blanche, and like we were saying with Mufasa's arc, there is no arc. He has to be a pure, blameless character at all times, because he becomes James Earl Jones, who, it's not a spoiler, it's the first frame of the movie, the film is dedicated to. They put the dedication at the beginning, not the end. Like, it's like you can't impeach James Earl Jones' legacy, so your character has to be perfect. Which, that's a great tribute to James Earl Jones, but dramatically it makes your protagonist extremely a nerd. He can't grow or change. And so I feel like if, in your hypothetical, if we were just dealing with like an animated movie where they let him do whatever he wants to do, I feel like we would have a much different Mufasa.
Well, and what's more, I think that if we had not chosen the photorealistic animation, there are a couple of ways that the film would have been more enjoyable, because number one, I think you would have had an easier time telling the lions apart. Like, I literally at times was lost about who was who and who was doing what. Like, Barry Jenkins colors them differently. Like, they're white lions, and then they're sort of gray lions, and then they're gold lions. And
it's
that's part of how that's part of how he tries to help us figure out who's who. But I still had a little trouble at times, especially if there's action going on, telling exactly who was what and what was happening. But then the other thing is, if you went with the original animation style, you could have gotten Nathan Lane. You could have gotten some of the original voices, the ones who were still alive. I know there's some who passed on, but I mean, no offense to the guys who did it in the more recent version, in the Jon Favreau version, but the originals are just better. They're just better. So
yeah, and it's getting back to like the live action or the photorealistic animation style. Jason, you talking about realism in this movie, this actually brings me up to two things. A question I want to ask you guys, and then something that was just a curious observation. I kind of couldn't help but just sort of like thinking about the realities of real animals while watching this. And I don't know if that's something you guys have happened, where it's like, there's a lot of talk in here about like all the animals need to like get along with each other. And never before have I really been thinking about like the lion eats the gazelle, right? Like, why does the gazelle want to help the lion? But it's because I'm looking at a photorealistic animal, and my mind isn't thinking that with a more kind of cartoonish animal. Or even with, there's the whole plot line in this movie with the villains, which is this one tribe of white lions. The leader is voiced by Mads Mikkelsen, who there's a lot in here about how lions in the wild, I presume this is a real thing, because otherwise this would be a very dark thing to just write into your movie. Like, if one pride takes over the other, they like kill the male lions.
Yeah.
Which is a thing that like, I know there's life or death stakes in like the original Lion King movie, but it's just sort of like the realities of just sort of like animals like mauling and killing each other, I think was much more on the forefront of my mind. And like, I could not displace that from what I was watching, which made just sort of like the interactions between, like, I kept thinking, what are these lions going to eat?
Yeah.
They're walking around.
The movie even talks about the fact that they're hungry at times and things like that. Yeah. I remember from the original Lion King, I actually, one of the things I loved in the original was the scene where Mufasa talks to Simba about, yes, we eat the lions, we eat the gazelles, but then when we die, we become the grass, and we merge with the earth, and the gazelles eat us, and that's part of the circle of life thing that he explains. And I always thought that was sort of a beautiful way of explaining to a young child, perhaps, how all this stuff works. But yeah, it's weird and awkward that lions are friends with all these other creatures, when in reality, if they got close to each other, the lion would be like, chomp.
Right. And it sounds like such a dumb, nitpicky thing for me to bring up, but I think it is, I'm much more conscious of it when I'm looking like at an animal that like looks like a real animal out in the wild, instead of, oh, this is like a happy cartoon Disney lion. Like, yeah, he'll get along with the gazelle. But I want to ask you guys, like, on that note, like, in thinking about this sort of larger movement of movies Disney has done with sort of live action remakes of their animated properties, what do you think it is behind this sort of idea that like audiences want to see like the most realistic, like audiences want realism in these sort of fantastical Disney things? Is it just sort of studio stupidity, or do you think there's something like inherent in audiences now where they're like, I want it to look like a real lion. I'm not going to buy it if it's not a real lion.
Well, if I'm being blunt, which we are, I think it's the name recognition, it's the IP, and you can't remake an animated film in animation. And so it's like, okay, how can we keep all of these characters that viewers recognize, but do it in a way that allows us to justify doing the movie again? And it's like, okay, well, what if we do, live action, which is where you get Cinderella, where you get Beauty and the Beast, where you get Little Mermaid. But, with Lion King, you're not, it's like you were saying before, you're not making a live action Lion King because you're not getting animal actors, because we've kind of evolved past that, the humane aspect of it and everything. But I think it really is just, how can we make another movie with characters that audiences recognize? This is the best option we have at the moment.
And I think, yes, a lot of it is Disney being cynical. I think a lot of it originally was Disney saying, "Oh, this is a capability we have now with computer animation, and let's see what this is like." And I think that was sort of interesting. At this point, I think it's a more cynical, as you say, way to make money off of it. But there's sort of in your original question, Jesse, there's almost a fallacy to it in that, we need them to look real. The craziness about that is, and I know we were going to talk about this a little bit, to me, the best animated films of the year are two movies where none of it looks real. It all looks... the two best animated movies of the year, I think, no question about it, are The Wild Robot and Flow. Yep. And in both those movies, all the characters, all the animals, it's all animals, none of it looks real. They all look like paintings. It's completely... It looks drawn, even though Flow is all done on a computer. And my bet is Wild Robot was it. Well, no one really does hand-drawn animation anymore. It doesn't make sense to do it when you can do it on a computer. But it looks hand-drawn, and we love the art and the beauty of those films. And I think we appreciate the art that we're getting in those films more than we do this very realistic-looking thing that is...
It's embracing the medium of animation and people being like, well, what can we do with animation that like you couldn't do in a live action
and
thing?
It also helps you to kind of gloss over some of these issues that we've talked about, because I had some of the same questions with Wild Robot that you had with Mufasa, which is, if all of these animals are hanging out in the same cave, how are they not eating each other? And it's like, well, when the animals can point blank say, we're calling a truce till spring. Or when you have in Flow, an animal steering the trolling motor, that they sort of accidentally figured out. Those movies are making it, they're making their plot implausibilities feel more believable.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's worth noting that I think it's significant in The Wild Robot when they have that conversation that, like, okay, we're going to deal with the reality of the fact that some of us want to eat some of the others. And in Flow, when the crane or whatever kind of bird that was, and the cat, they both get some fish that they give to the other animals. And you sort of have this acknowledgement of, as Jesse says, the elephant in the room about some animals wanting to eat other ones. And they integrate it into the story, I think, quite beautifully in both cases.
Okay, so I want to, maybe now is a good time for us to talk about our two central arcs to Mufasa, the movie. Mufasa as a character just sort of begins as, I mean, there is no arc. It is Mufasa. The arc of the movie is Mufasa learns that he is the true special chosen one all along, and that he's totally awesome and can do nothing wrong. And it did also bring to me a funny end. I guess I'll throw up a spoiler warning here. We'll do a little siren. So we get to the end of this movie, and they reach this like mythical, magical valley, and Mufasa saves them from the evil lions, and we get this speech that, it weirdly reminded me a lot of the end to Gladiator 2 this year, where we kind of talked about with Gladiator 2, how you get to the end of that movie and Denzel is like, Rome is the most like despicable, like evil society that's ever existed. We need to burn this MF down. And you as an audience are like, hell yeah, Denzel, I'm with you all the way. And then the movie is like actually Denzel is the villain, and what Rome really needs is another emperor with just a more sensible view of government. And this movie, I would argue, kind of ends in another similar weird space where Mufasa is arguing like, no, we're all equal. We all live together. We're all part of the circle of life. And all the animals at once are like, no, Mufasa, you are the chosen one. You are greater than all of us, and you must rule.
Yeah, it made no sense.
Is this movie pro monarchy in you guys' eyes?
Like, to be honest, I know, Jason, you just said it made no sense, and not to go too far down this road, but, I mean, recent events have kind of showed us, like, some people like that. Like, oh, you know what's best, you lead, tell us what to do.
Right. Gladiator 2 and Mufasa, an excellent double feature on Hollywood movies that low-key are just sort of like elitism.
Yeah.
Which I can't.
It's like,
thumbs up.
Hey, aristocracy. Hey,
yeah.
Like, not straight up fascism, but, like, hey, there's one guy, he's going to tell us what to do, and we're like, you're smart, or we like you, go for it.
I mean, look, if we're talking about Mufasa's arc, he's practically a god from the first moment.
Yeah.
Like, he's
he
super
has,
fast.
Like, mutant superpowers. He can, like, smell the flowers off people's fur. And
he has a sense of smell and an intuition that might as well be a superpower. He's good. He's smart. He's strong. From day one. Yes, of course he'd be a good king. That's apparent from the opening moment of the film.
His literal one weakness in the entire film is he's afraid of water for a little while.
Yeah. Like when he falls in the water, he has little flashes of the flood that carried him away. But he gets past it, and it really isn't that big a deal, because most of the time they're not in the water.
Or when we get to, now we can kind of transition probably to talking about the Scar arc. Like, when we get to that part of the movie, when it's like, actually Mufasa's real weakness, he's just too humble.
Yeah, by the way, Scar...
He's too loyal.
Did you understand why he turned? It doesn't...
I understood why he turned. I just didn't, like, understand that. I was just sort of like, I can't believe that this is the reason that this is happening.
Like it was accidentally kind of right. Like, because it's...
Spoilers.
Yeah.
Scar in The Lion King hates his brother with a deep passion, and let's remind ourselves, kills his brother in The Lion King.
Oh, and they by the way, they remind us of it repeatedly in this movie.
I actually kind of like that as a little slight nod to the audience of like, this is who this character is going to become. But all of that is just because Mufasa took his baddie. You know what I mean? Like,
he doesn't, in the original Lion King, he doesn't care about her. What's her name?
Sarabi.
He has no relationship with Sarabi in the original Lion King. And now in this movie, the fact that he can't be with her is like the whole reason that he abandons his entire personality.
So This is why I say it's like through no like achievement of their own. I feel like they accidentally got it right because incels are ruining the world right now.
That's a perfect way of putting it, Josh.
He's an incel.
The spoiler is Scar is an incel, is basically what this movie is.
But even that feels like it's Disney course correcting, because one of the biggest sort of running joke memes of Disney history is that Scar is like one of the biggest like queens and gay icons of Disney animation. Like Jeremy Irons plays him as like just
Jeremy Irons is like queen. Eating like the whole ham and the whole wheel of cheese with that of just like
no, let's make it about a girl.
Performance is.
Let's make it about a girl for a character who has no interest in girls in the original film whatsoever.
Well, and also then we get to the weird ending where like Scar then briefly regrets turning against them and joining with the villain, and then so helps them defeat the villain. And then there's this whole awkward exchange where he's like, so do I get, you guys can probably hear my dog barking in the background. So he gives this whole exchange of like, so any chance that we're all good? And Mufasa's like, yeah, I'll extend you mercy, but I refuse to ever call you against your your name again. And Scar says, well, why don't you call me Scar? That way I can always remember that I have a scar and that I scarred you.
Bad. Can I just say it's just bad? I can't believe that Barry Jenkins read the script and went, oh yeah, this works. I said that earlier, and I just it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. Why make a prequel?
I do think that like I will say I think the voice acting in this movie is pretty good, and I do kind of have to shout out both Calvin Harris Jr. Or Kelvin Harrison Jr., who does the voice of young Scar, and then Aaron Pierre, who was like unbelievable earlier this year in what was that awesome Rebel Ridge? Yeah, that great Netflix action movie. Both of them, I think they have good chemistry with each other on screen, but I don't know. It's just that thing of like you can feel Barry like trying to give this thing some life, but like it can't help but like bump up against some like bad exchanges that I wonder like, was that in the script? Is that a weird Disney studio note? Like, what is the reason that like it has this like very banal kind of silly explanation for like why this character and like if Scar then is like, my bad, I'm sorry, I was being mean, like then why does he kill his brother in The Lion King?
Well, I will agree with you. Aaron Pierre, Kelvin Harrison Jr., both incredible actors, but I think so I agree with you, voice acting wise, fantastic, can't fault the actors, but I do think that casting is sort of a prime example of the issues with this movie. Aaron Pierre, British actor, doing an American accent. Kelvin Harrison Jr., American actor, doing a British accent.
I was wondering why he did that, and then I remembered Chiwetel Ejiofor was Scar in the...
It's not like if you flipped those actors, the audience is going to be going, wait a minute, like, make Aaron Pierre Scar.
I did not know that he was British. That's a surprise to me.
Yeah, Aaron Pierre's super British. And so, like, you flip those two characters, it kind of makes sense. I don't know why they didn't. I feel like both actors are strong enough that they could have done either role.
By the way, side note, Kelvin Harrison Jr., if you enjoy his performance here, there's a film he made about 4 years ago called Loose that is such a good movie that no one ever saw. Please go out and find Loose if you like Kelvin Harrison Jr. I thought that the voice acting in this is fine. You can't get past the fact that the script is nonsense and doesn't make sense, and this is a film that doesn't need to be made. So you could have gotten the greatest voices on earth, and it wouldn't have mattered.
To kind of hone in on that again for just a second, I legit thought that Mads Mikkelsen was Antonio Banderas for half the
I knew as soon as I heard that purr coming from that kitty, I was like, that's Mads. That guy's just on speed dial of any time like a Disney movie needs a villain. Like what? He's been a villain in a Marvel movie, a villain in a Star Wars movie. Like they just got that guy on speed dial.
I mean, he's great.
Sure.
Well, as we kind of look to wrap up, guys, because I don't know how much more our audience could probably take. 3 like grown white men just like screaming about a Lion King prequel.
I think we should, before we wrap up Lion King completely, and I didn't know if you want to talk about other animation stuff, but this is not like we've ripped on it for a while. It's not terrible. It's not worthless. I think there's probably an audience out there that will enjoy it, especially a younger audience. That thinks that the Timon and Pumbaa... We didn't spend enough time talking about how horrible the present day stuff with Timon and Pumbaa is.
Yeah, that really feels shoehorned in there of like, kind of like how you said, Josh, of like, we need a joke every like 20 minutes or so, and like it's been a while since.
It's awful. It's terrible. It doesn't advance the story at all. It does nothing. But again, I don't think that this is a terrible movie. I just think that they got there's just a lot of laziness and a lot of corporate be careful kind of stuff happening with it.
It's a weird misshapen object, I think, is what I would say. And I would toss the ball to you guys. You have children. I don't have children. I have a fur baby, but that's about it. Maybe you guys can recommend some animated films that people can check out over the holidays, and then they may save $200 that they would have spent taking the whole family to go see Mufasa.
Yeah, I think we've covered the highlights. This has been a really subpar year for animation, I would say. I mean, you've got The Wild Robot, which is head and shoulders above anything. So if you haven't seen The Wild Robot, obviously see that. I also want to talk about Flow, which we already did a little bit, which is a Latvian film, which is played in a handful of Atlanta theaters, but I'm sure is going to hit streaming in a couple of weeks or something, because that's just how the business is now. No dialogue, even though like
Josh, stress that to people. Folks should understand, there's literally not a word spoken in this film.
These are cute talking animals. These are animals behaving like animals. And like Jason mentioned earlier, it's done solely through computer animation, but it's done to really evoke that hand-drawn feel.
Yeah.
So those are the two that, like, if you've got to, if you're trying to take the kids to something, take them to Wild Robot, take them to Flow. Inside Out 2 was fine. I remember really liking it when it came out, but it sort of faded from view over the last few months.
Still the biggest hit of the year.
Yeah, which is crazy. But, I mean, but then you've got stuff like, Despicable Me 17 or whatever it was that came out. You've got stuff like the Garfield movie. And then
we're getting a Sonic the Hedgehog, which we haven't seen yet.
Sonic 3. Yeah,
I can't imagine it's any good. There's just like no chance it's any good.
But I think somebody was saying earlier, like, those Sonic movies make insane money. And there is a real chance this weekend, I think, that you're going to see kind of a neck-and-neck competition between this and Mufasa. And I may be totally wrong and Mufasa blow this thing out of the water, but the previous movies have made enough money that I think there's some competition there, that you're putting two kids' movies out where parents are going to have to make a choice.
So I have a Letterboxd list pulled up as well of the Disney live action remakes, and this made me think: is Disney getting to the end of this? Because here's the ones we've gotten so far: Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland movie, which is just absolutely like if you like smeared bloody diarrhea all over your television screen. It might be the ugliest looking movie that has like ever been made.
But wait, you know what? At least I think they're having fun. I felt like Tim Burton and the people in it were having fun.
Well, I did not.
Helena Bonham Carter was having fun. That's for damn well sure.
Go back and watch clips from that movie. Just like type that into YouTube, Jason. You will be. I did that like a couple of years ago, and I was like amazed at how bad that movie looks.
Okay.
It is like, well, it looks so much worse than you remember.
Okay.
Then like Maleficent, Cinderella, Pete's Dragon.
I'm going to stop you there for 1 second. Like, that is, in a perfect world, I think that's the route Disney would go, which is with Pete's Dragon, I will contend is the best of these live action remakes, because they took a movie that wasn't good in the first place and used the basic premise to tell a better story. I love Pete's Dragon, and it made $0, so Disney took all the wrong lessons from it.
And then they did The Jungle Book, which I remember being okay. Beauty and the Beast, bad. Christopher Robin, cute puppets. Dumbo.
Dumbo was bad. Dumbo was awful.
That one, I will at least give Tim Burton credit in that one. Michael Keaton plays Walt Disney as a villain in a Disney.
That is true.
So I give it like half credit for that.
Aladdin, which was a giant hit, but gave us creepy blue Will Smith.
That was just weird.
That was Disney Hitch. That was like they remade Hitch as Aladdin.
The Lion King, which we've mentioned, Lady and the Tramp, which was a direct to streaming movie. I don't believe I watched that.
If you asked me if that existed, I would not have believed you.
Mulan, which is a big one for my generation, the millennials out there, but cannot say that movie is very good. Cruella, which I guess I'll leave that.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I gotta be real. I'm not here for the girl bossification of like a dog murderer. That's
I think Emma Stone goes a long way in selling subpar material.
Yeah, Emma Stone makes that work more than it probably should have, and at least, like, I'll say this for like Cruella and Maleficent, exploring the backstory of the bad guys. To me, that's
at least an idea.
Yeah,
there's potential there. It's something kind of interesting to do. Those two are two of the better ones of this atrocious list.
Well, you say that, Jason, but did you catch Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio that went direct to streaming?
Was that did Disney do that?
Yeah.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that might be Robert Zemeckis' worst movie, and that's really
saying
something. Then the David Lowery Peter Pan movie, which I think was also a direct-to-streaming thing. I know I saw that. I don't really remember anything about it. Little Mermaid, which was that a hit?
I don't really remember. It was controversial, that's for sure.
The thing I remember
controversial for dumb reasons, and then
the thing I remember about Little Mermaid is it was a full hour longer.
Wow. You've really that's the thing, because the original Little Mermaid is just like a tight 76 minutes or something like that. It's just nothing but one banger song after the other, and yet I had to spend so much time sitting through just sort of people walking around palaces and thinking about, speaking of things in animated movies that you don't think about until they're live action. I shouldn't have to be thinking about colonialism in a Little Mermaid movie. You know what I mean?
Is there more? Does the list continue?
No, that's it for now. But then next year we have there's the Snow White movie with Rachel Zegler, which has been in production, I feel like, for 87 years, and they just keep reshooting. And there's Lilo and Stitch next year. It doesn't look like Moana is coming. That's 2026. It looks like that's been delayed. But I'm also seeing on here Hunchback of Notre Dame.
No.
Which I don't think I even...
I think they're doing a Hercules, too, right? Are they doing a Hercules?
There is a Hercules. It looks like someone has been cast in that. Ferdia Walsh-Pelio. I don't know who that is.
That's the kid from Sing Street.
Okay. Did you know Questlove is directing a live action remake of The Aristocrats, or The Aristocats, I should say?
No.
News to me too.
Sure.
And even crazier, did you know Michelle Gondry? No, I'm sorry. I take that back. I misread this. I thought this said Michelle Gondry was remaking Tangled, and I was about to be like,
"Oh, I'm in."
That is wild.
Oh, I'm in. That sounds amazing.
But I take that back. It's the guy who did The Greatest Showman and the Robbie Robertson movie that's coming.
Oh, the Robbie Williams monkey movie.
The Robbie Williams monkey movie. That he's remaking Tangled. I'm sorry, Michelle Gondry is not remaking Tangled. I misread that. That would be wild, though.
Got my hopes up.
I mean, I think,
are you guys feeling optimistic?
Well, so here's the problem. For decades, Disney had a money-making machine because they had these great animated films, and they would just put them out every 7 or 8 years. It was just this cycle. And Cinderella was re-released. 101, they just re-release them every 7 or 8 years because there was a new crop of kids that were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old who hadn't seen the original one, and they got to watch them. And Disney was printing money every single year from it. And then Disney said, wait a second, we're going to put them out on VHS, on DVD. And Disney printed a whole huge pile of money and sold them to everybody. And then Disney said, wait a second, we'll put them on our streaming service, Disney Plus. And Disney made a huge pile of money again off of these properties. And then it had run out. And there was nothing more you could do with those things. If you want to watch the original Snow White, you can watch the original Snow White, whether you own it on VHS or DVD or Blu-ray or watch it on Disney+. So if you're Disney and you own the original Snow White and you're like, how can I keep making money off of this? You remake it live action. It is intellectually, creatively bankrupt, and it's sad.
Yeah, you bring up a good point too, because I remember that, you know, like a lot of that release strategy and even the home video stuff was profitable because of, you know, I mentioned like the vault. Like it would be like 101 Dalmatians is coming out of the Disney vault, and we've only made like a finite number of like VHS copies for them, and it's going to be at Walmart this month, and you better freaking buy it if you want to watch 101 Dalmatians.
Brilliant marketing strategy.
Yeah, and now with streaming, like, you can't do that because it's just sort of like exists in perpetuity on like Disney Plus, and like you don't have to keep buying it.
So it sounds like what both of you guys are telling me is that we really need that Song of the South remake.
Oh God. Oh man. Well, I don't know how we're going to top.
I'm out. Go on.
Hi everyone.
I'm getting an alert that this podcast is now canceled. We're losing all of our subscribers. We're being bought by the Daily Wire. That's weird. Well, Jason, Josh, thanks as always. This has been fun ranting about children's movies with you guys. Next week we'll dive back into the world of movies made for us adults. We're going to be talking about A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan, Timothée Chalamet movie, and we're going to be talking about my beloved Count Orlok as we talk about Nosferatu and the horny vampire movies. You guys excited for that?